with running, you've got to understand yourself before you, all the tech and all this stuff. It's all great that, the 4-inch thick trainers and the carbon plating and all the gear and that. So that's all brilliant. But if you ain't got this, you ain't got the chops, you get to 21 miles on a marathon. It doesn't matter how thick your soles are, doesn't matter how good your Garmin is, you're going to get wiped out.
Hey guys, and welcome back to It's Pretty Simple, a podcast about fitness, nutrition, and fat loss. I'm your host, Nikita, and I'm here to help you make your journey just a little bit more simple. Today's episode, we're going to be focusing on running. I'm joined by John Hill. He's an online running coach who works with athletes over 35, which is why I was very intrigued to speak to him because I am 35. And he helps them achieve their marathon goals. And John has completed 14 marathons, correct?
That's right,
so far?
14. God willing, 15 in 2.5 weeks.
Nice. And he's also had a personal best of 2 hours, 56 minutes at the age of 45. Right. I want to be like you when I grow up.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
John's also, he's also a host of a podcast that he has, 12 Months to Marathon, where he shares all his insights on marathon training, race preparation, and also the mental aspects of running. So if you are training for a marathon or you want to get into running, make sure you keep listening to this episode. Hey, John, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Nikita. I appreciate it very much.
I appreciate you being here. So what got you into running? How did you develop your passion for it? And when did you get into it?
I'll give you the short version of the story. So funny enough, 20 years ago this year, I decided to lose weight. And I'd always battled with my weight as a teenager and a young kid. I wasn't huge, but I was always quite a fat, chubby kid, whatever language you want to use. And I lost weight a little bit in my early 20s, then put a load back on. And what happened when I was about 28 was I had a bit of an epiphany and I decided to lose weight. And I wasn't completely sedentary. I was your classic sort of working class UK male, played football, did all that sort of stuff. And obviously when I was a kid, you had to be outdoors because there was nothing to do. So that sort of buffered being really big. But then when I hit 28, I was in a bad way. I was probably pound for pound, about 70 pounds, 30 odd kilos heavier than I am now. Had a bit of an epiphany, had a bit of a meltdown, as I like to call it, and then got into fitness. Now, I lost weight quite rapidly because I was 28. So 28-year-old male, as you know yourself, working with maybe slightly older females, a 28-year-old male is going to drop weight fairly quickly because of hormonal stuff and the muscle and all that business. It's never easy, but I dropped weight quite quickly. Then I sort of accidentally fell into the fitness industry because I kept seeing a personal trainer in the gym, and I was like, oh, I wonder what that's all about. I've never been in that industry at all, totally different, and then got into that at 32. Now, the reason why I give you that background is because I never classed myself as a runner, really. I got into pretty decent shape in my early 30s. I got really heavily into nutrition, really heavy into like gym, weight training, all that sort of business. So I was in good shape without necessarily doing a lot of inverted commas cardio. And I could do it. I was fit. So I could, if you said to me, go and run 5K or 10K, run for an hour, I could do it, but it wasn't pretty. And in 2011, funny enough, a personal training client of mine, who I still work with to this day, who I don't work with many anymore, but I've got a few that have been with me for years. He said he was doing a half marathon close to where we are here in Birmingham. And I said, okay, I'll do it with you. And that was 2011. And that was the first one. And then because I did that, and then I thought, oh, I'd perhaps like to beat my time the following year. So I went back the following year and I beat my time. And then I thought, oh, I'd quite like to beat my time again. And what happened was at around that time, 2013 time, a friend of mine who was a personal trainer was doing the London Marathon. And I had this weird thought, call it weird, that can you really say you're a fitness person if you've never done a marathon? I don't know where it came from. So I don't know. I can remember it. I was like, oh, and I just had this thing about, wouldn't that be a cool thing to do? I'm very big on stories, and I'm very big on, in a conversation, if somebody said London Marathon, I'd like to say, oh, I've done that. Or, do you know what I mean? I'm that sort of person. So I'm very big on stories. And that linked, so I did the London Marathon. I did it in honor of my mother who died 2014 of cancer. So I did it about 9 weeks after that, raised a load of money for charity, did it in her name. Brilliant. And I was fortunate enough to go back 10 years later and do it again. I didn't plan it that way. It was a bit of an accident. Anyway, so that's what got me into, so I got into running through that climb. I found out that it was good in the sense that it was quite easily measurable. So you can either go faster or further. It's quite easy to make that decision. And whilst I've always loved training in the gym, I've always lifted weights, always, and I've done different things like high rocks and things like that. I found running, number one, it was very good for my body because of I had a genetic test, DNA testing done about 10 years ago, a good one. And it told me actually that I respond well to a mix of cardio and weights. And at the time I was like very much, I need to just lift weights and, sort my diet out type of thing. But actually it turned out that I had this balance of the two. So I thought, well, I'll integrate it in. And then once I got into marathon, I just loved it. And when I first did the marathon distance, it's such I don't recommend it to people because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of training, it's a long way. But it was such an amazing experience for me, the atmosphere, the people, the vibe, and being part of something relatively iconic. Because weirdly, even though my mum wasn't a fit woman, she never really kept fit. She always watched the marathon. It was always odd, and I always thought it was quite odd. I was like, what's she watching the marathon for? It's because it's such an iconic event, and that's what kind of got me into it. And I got the bug, and then I kind of saw what it did for me, and I've always been the sort of person that because I have gone through such a big transformation, because if you're just in the state of me at 28, I mean, I was out of breath doing my shoelaces up. It wasn't great. It wasn't great. I mean, I smoked, I drank, I did some other stuff I'll tell you about when you're older. And I wasn't in a good way, physically and mentally. So I saw the transformation. And then I saw, particularly with running, just that euphoric experience of being able to do something that most people wouldn't even contemplate. And no matter how fast you go or that's all irrelevant. It's just the experience that you have. So that's what got me into then saying, well, actually, I would like to help others achieve that level of potential.
That's super cool. I mean, for me, my getting into fitness is pretty similar. I was skinny fat. I used to drink a lot. I used to smoke a lot. I used to do a lot of other things too that,
Oh, very similar. The sound of it then. You're very
similar. Yeah. And then actually my best friend dragged me to the gym and I was like, I hate this shit. And fell in love with it and then wanted to help other people as well. But running is something that I have never been a fan of at all. I've done it many, many times. I used to always do like 5K races and just once a year, and that was it. And then I recently pushed myself to go do a 10K last year. And then one of my friends decided, well, actually, I was living in Kuwait. So the temperature there most of the year is quite hot. So it's really hard to actually pick up running. So you can only do it for a little bit. So, if you start doing it in the winter, you're not doing it in the summer. And I refuse to run indoors. Then I moved to Spain a few years ago and I realized that my life in general, I became more active from just daily living. And I was like, you know what? I want to start running because the weather is nice here most of the year to run. And so I started increasing, but never more than 3 or 5K. And then I did, then I realized I was getting better at those times. So I was like, all right, 10K. I did a 10K last year. Went great. Now I've done another 10K and I decided, one of my friends was like, hey, why don't we go do a half marathon? And I'm like, I don't like running, but sure, I've been running quite a bit. And now I easily can go out and do a 9, 10, 11K. I haven't gotten any more than that as yet, but the half marathon I'm training for is in September. So I'm hoping to be ready for that by then. But yeah, it was never something I enjoyed. Like if the 5Ks, I just felt like dread every single time. But now that the mileage is increasing, I find after the 5K, I start getting into this nice mental groove of, okay, this is nice, but I have to cross that 5K mark to start feeling okay about it. Yeah. So that comes to my next question of what were the mindset shifts that help you stick with running? Because if it wasn't it wasn't something you were enjoying in the beginning, or if you were.
I didn't think it was. That was the thing. And it was like, I did it because I used to do, when I first started losing weight, because I didn't have the knowledge that I've got now, because I did sort of 10 years as a personal trainer, got a nutrition diploma. So I got quite heavily into that side of things. But when I first started, I worked on this, I don't know what it's like wherever you are in the UK, when you go for a gym induction, they sort of give you like 20 minutes on the bike, 20 minutes on the row machine, 20 minutes on the treadmill. And they just give you that. Yeah, that's your gym induction. So because I'd done that years ago, I thought, well, actually, if to lose weight, I need to do more cardio to them. Well, that was most my primitive mind thinking at the time. So I could run like 5K on a treadmill, but then I'd never run outdoors. It was something I'd never done because that was something that I thought was what other people did. So what I talk about is, and what I realised with time and what I realise now is I've got something I call my 3 M's of running. So the first M is mindset stroke mentality. And what I mean by that is there's one question you always need to ask yourself when you're running, which is, it's not, do I want to do this? It's can I? Because what you've got to do is you've got to have a decent understanding of your body. Now, I ruffle a few feathers because I'm very much a feel person. I'm not very technical when it comes to this stuff. All I know is how I went from, fat to fit to marathon runner to pretty decent, good club running level. Obviously I'm a child compared to some of the people that you see at these things, but pretty decent for my age. Finished in top 4% of the UK second largest marathon. So I'm at an okay level. And all I did was how I felt. So yes, there are some technical elements to it, but I think what most people do is they go for the technical before they understand the mindset. And they go, actually, I need to be really comfortable with myself here because I need to know what I've got in the tank. And that's as much a mental thing as a physical thing. Now, the physical thing is the technical side, which is the second end, which I call the mechanics of it. And the mechanics of it is the physical. So that's your physical state, that's your strength, that's your flexibility and functional strength, that's your nutrition. That's all the bits that you would like. You have to research and practice to become a better mechanical runner, which is just how you take it to the next level. And then the third M is miles, which is kilometers. But I obviously say miles because it fits with 3 M's, which is the fact that you've just got to do the miles. And if you're training for something, you can't ever hide or avoid the miles. But the first M for me, Nikita, is the most important one. You have to be comfortable with yourself because now I've always worked primarily with females, right? And there's something else that I do at the moment. I do a group fitness business, which I've done for years, which is specifically, interestingly, I know it's what you do, women over 40, right? Now, there's a massive self-conscious issue here. And that's because if you go out as a woman and you've got to put the spandex on and it's quite tight fitting and you haven't been out for a while, I think running's quite exposing. Because you're outside, you're running, so you're going to be a bit flustered, you're going to be red-faced, you're going to be sweaty, more people are going to see you. Whereas if you're in a gym, it's got that sort of vibe to it, but at least you're in a gym. Do you know what I mean? But when you're out and about, I think you're very exposed. So I think having that understanding of how to control yourself is really important because if you panic and you go off too quick or you think you're going to lose your breathing, and that's the first, if that goes, as we all know from sort of meditative practice and all this stuff, getting your breathing under control is very calming. And it's the same for running. So that's why I always say that mindset thing of, right, I need to get to know myself here. Because I need to understand what I've got in the tank, if that makes sense. So for me, the mindset shift was, this isn't as bad as I think it is. And then you just apply that to each distance. So for example, you do a 5K and you go, okay, I've done that now. What do I want to do next? Do I want to get faster at that distance or do I want to go further? And some people say, or they just say, I just want to stay doing the 5K at the pace I'm doing, which is great.
That's what I did in the beginning, actually. It's like, I don't think I can do anymore. That's what my mindset was. Which
is great. And I think the problem, I don't know how much of a tangent you mind me going on here, but when I lost weight 20 years ago, there wasn't the level of information there was now, right? So it was like, literally, I need to eat less and move more. So there's no real social media. The internet was quite new then. So I didn't have all this information at my fingertips. So I just did the basics. The problem now is that people get so deep in the weeds on the actual, they're not actually going for a run. I mean, my funny comment is always people will spend 30 minutes on Googling the best exercise for fat loss versus going for a walk.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of mindset and it's analysis, paralysis by analysis. So with running, you've got to understand yourself before you, all the tech and all this stuff. It's all great that, the 4-inch thick trainers and the carbon plating and all the gear and that's all brilliant. But if you ain't got this, you ain't got the chops, you get to 21 miles on a marathon, don't matter how thick your soles are, don't matter how good your Garmin is, you're going to get wiped out. So I think you have to have that firm understanding of yourself. And the mindset shift for me was, firstly, I can do this. Secondly, I don't class myself as a natural runner because I'm a little box-shaped man. I'm not tall and thin. I mean, I go to the front of a race and I'm like, I'm the fattest one here. I'm not. But because of that, I've got that fat kid.
Yeah.
Legacy. I'll stand there and I'll go, these are all thin people. This short fat bloke doing it. Do you know what I mean? But actually, and I've proved that because I'm strong as well, which I know is your jam. I've always been a strong runner. Someone told me 20 years ago, train legs. So I've always trained legs because someone told me 20 years ago, you should train your legs. And so I've always done it. So it's knowing you can do it, but I think you've got to be really confident, understand yourself and understand your journey and understand that it's not a competition. Most people out there are not athletes. Most people are just normal. Like if you do I'm not sure whether they've got them in Spain, but if you do parkrun, for example, it's quite global now, parkrun. So parkrun in the UK, 5K events all over the UK in parks, massive, big thing. There's like hundreds of people go to it. People go to that as a good place to start. And they think there's going to be like not 99% Mo Farahs and them, do you know what I mean? Or 99% Kipchoge's. It's not. It's a lot of normal people. And if you look at the average run times for 5K, 10K and those sort of distances, it's actually, I think the average in the UK, I think the average pace is 10-minute miles. And obviously divide that by 1.6 to work out your Ks, but it's 10-minute miles, which isn't that fast really. It's quite average. And if I think if you just work on your mindset and understand that most people will support you on your journey, and you've just and everyone's in a similar boat, you'll be okay. And that was the thing for me, because I didn't, in the fitness industry, as you know, it can get a little bit competitive, a bit bravado. It's not great, but it's where we are. But actually, when you get out there and do it, it's all right, and most people will support you. So the biggest mindset shift for me was knowing that actually I can be this thing and I can do it, and actually you can run quite a long way if you do everything right after yourself. So if you want to.
No, I agree. I mean, I also remember when I was doing just 5Ks, I didn't want to do any more than that, because in my head, I felt like if I'm a personal trainer, I should be, averaging better times, because then people are going to be like, oh, you're not that fit. But then I started realizing, like, other trainers don't run. I have chosen to start running. So, or like I bicycle as well. And doesn't mean that it makes me less good of a trainer just because, I don't do powerlifting. I don't do CrossFit. So it's the same concept. So when I started realizing that, I was like, you know what? I just want to compete with myself and my times. And then the next mind shift change I had was, now since I've started training for this half marathon, I was trying to plan my training. And before, I'd go for a run, let's say on a Sunday, and it would be like a 5K run. And that was it. That's my training for the day, But now I realize with this kind of training, I'm running 3 times a week. I do jiu-jitsu 3 times a week, and I'm strength training 3 to 4 times a week. And I'm actually managing to do all of that because I'm taking care of all the other things as well. So back then it was like, oh, if I run a 5K, that's my only workout. And now I'm just like, okay, I'm going to do my run in the morning and then go to the gym in the evening. And I'm physically still capable. But if I told myself I wasn't, I would feel like shit all the time.
Yeah.
So it was just starting to just say, try it, do it, see what's working for you and your body, and then decide. Don't just straight off the bat say, I can't do this. So I really had to have a lot of conversations with myself and have a lot of battles in my head to actually get to the point of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I think for me is like when people see you at different parts of the journey. So like I say, I would never start out on a fitness journey or a running journey with the intention of doing any, running a marathon or anything like that, because it's a very difficult thing to do. And I think sometimes we make the wrong comparisons. And when we say, what I've realized recently for some studying I've been doing recently, is when we say I can't, what we usually mean is I won't. And I won't is based on fear. So if you're able to address what you're actually scared of and say, well, actually, what am I scared of here? It's not I can't do it, because if you're physically enabled, you've got a broken bone or whatever, let's park that. Let's say you're physically able. Then it's like, well, why won't you? What are you scared of? And when we address, and there was a lot of fears that I had to overcome when I first started all the journey. I walked into the gym 20 years ago as an overweight man, expecting to see a load of, buff people and them laughing at me. Then when I became qualified as a fitness person, I was like, weird, because I was so odd now, considering what I know now. But I was 32. I was like, I'm too old. Literally, I thought I'm too old. 32, 16 years ago, I thought I'm going to walk in there and there's going to be a load of young kids. And actually, most of the best coaches I know now, because I know and I work with a lot of coaches, are over 40, at least over 30s. You get this impression. So I think there's a lot of things that weigh against you, and they are quite irrational fears. And this is why it's important, I think, to find a support network if you're looking to start running, because it's important to have that, whether that's a Couch to 5K club or whether that's something where you've got people in a similar place. I realised many years ago that when I sort of transcended across from sort of one-to-one coaching over to group stuff, whether that be on the fitness side or the running side, what I've tried to do is form communities, because I think what's happened is, since obviously what happened a few years ago, it's like people think they're more connected because of this, what we're using, but they're actually not, because they're not connected because they're not meeting in person. So like I always use the example of, here in the UK, you'd have your village and you'd have your church in the middle, whether you're religious or not is irrelevant. You'd have your church in the middle, you'd have your village, and that was your community, and everyone was there. But that's now been separated because everybody's in different places, in different ones. So everyone's trying to connect, and they're not actually connected. So trying to reconnect people in a community, I think, is very, very powerful. So if you are listening to this, and perhaps you're, whether it's getting into a fitness journey or whether it's getting into a running journey, whatever it might be, I think having some sort of community or something is very powerful because it's very supportive. What I've noticed about the running community since I've been doing this with 12 Months to Marathon is I get like random strangers like who are nice as pie to me. You know what I mean? And they're very supportive. I think everyone on the whole wants to see everyone do well. So get yourself into a community, get yourself into a running group, get yourself into a Couch to 5K group, whether that's online or in person, whatever, because it's really, really powerful. And I've noticed that from what I do now in my coaching group, it's more of a community. Yes, I'm obviously helping people, but actually we've got our sort of WhatsApp community, our school community, and they're there like, they just talk amongst themselves because they're all going through the challenges. It's like, oh, I've had a little niggle, I've had this, I've had that. And what they're doing is, which is brilliant, is they're not sitting there talking about how brilliant they are. They're talking about, I'm supposed to go for a 5K this morning, but I got halfway round because I felt terrible because the kids were up all night, and all these things that normal people, myself included, 2 kids under the age of 6, you know, there's only us 2 here, my wife and I, we've got no help. You know, these are the stuff that people face. So if you can find more people like that who are willing to say, oh no, it's okay to struggle. It's okay to think you're no good. It's okay to be slow, or whatever insert swear word here that means. Do you know what I mean? What does slow mean? Fast mean? Because are you fast compared to who? Because if you think you're fast, I remember, I'll tell a quick story. I did the Manchester Marathon a few years back, and I got on the tram, because in Manchester it's all trams. So I got on the tram, and there was this girl gets on. She was quite athletic, quite fit with her parents. And you sort of thought she'd done the marathon because she didn't look like very, you know, there's me like hunched up in the corner. I just finished. And 2 blokes were chatting, obviously Northerners here in the UK, a bit of banter, you know, all that. And they said to this girl, oh, did you do the marathon? She was a bit sheepy. She was on the phone. And she went, how did you get on? She went 2:30. And they just like, they took a step back because they didn't realise. They were like, oh, that's quite good, isn't it? Which it is. And then her dad went, well, you asked. Anyway, I get back to my hotel, and it was the winner of the women's elite race, a girl called Becky Briggs. It was the winner. She won it.
Oh, wow.
You only go on Facebook, and you see this girl crossing the line, and I was like, I recognise her. And it was her on the tram, and honestly, she looked like Nikki. She looked like she'd been for a stroll. And there's me, like, and like nothing. So what I'm trying to say is, like, when you're comparing yourself, who are you comparing yourself to? Because there's going to be somebody like that. There was a bloke, 62 years old, who broke the world record for a 62-year-old when I did it. You know, 62. He did it in 2:30, which is a 62-year-old. So when we make these silly comparisons, I mean, in your world, I mean, I remember I saw a bloke once in the gym. He was front squatting 220 kilograms, like it was nothing.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, lads, and then off he went. There's always going to be somebody stronger. There's always somebody fitter. There's always somebody faster. So you have to, if you can get around people who at least you can share similar experiences with, who can say, yes, I struggle, then it helps you because you know there's nothing wrong with you. And there isn't really, because it's hard, because you got to bear in mind that most people in exercise terms, statistically, don't do anything.
Yeah.
So even if you're running 5K, you're putting yourself in a small, you know, you're doing something.
You're doing something. Yeah.
Yeah, because you think about it. Yeah, everything now is, you know, you can read into this what you will, but everything now is forcing us not to. There's TV on demand all the time. There's food on demand all the time. Here in the UK, you can order pharmacy and get it delivered to your house. So there's all these things now that are forcing you to just, you don't
stay home. Yeah.
Social media. So to go out and actually online workouts, which is fine, but it's still on, you know what I mean? So everything's forcing us now. So if you're getting out and doing anything, then you've got to give yourself a bit of credit. So my biggest message to everybody is, if you're making progress, you have to understand the difference between actual progress and ideal progress. So we can all sit there in the ideal place and go, oh, I should be, worst word in the world, should be. Or you can say, I'm actually doing this. And when I'm ready, one of my favourite quotes, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, I will then do the thing. I started running when I was ready. Went, right, I want to do that. 28 years old, that it didn't start like that. It started with a decision to change.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I just think my biggest thing now with people, and hopefully if people are listening to this and if they are in that place of, you know, they're a little bit apprehensive, a little bit nervous, it's just start, just do something, get going, and who knows, I can attest to this, who knows where that could end up. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, this is the same way I started as well. It was like, now I feel ready to take the mileage up, and now I feel ready to, you know, add more days in my week. And yeah, I felt pressure before, but I was putting the pressure on myself, but now I feel pretty good about it. So I wanted to come into training for a marathon for beginners, or even a half marathon.
Yeah.
let's focus a little bit on how, I guess it's the same concept, because I'm training for a half marathon right now, but for a marathon or a half marathon, what does a well-rounded training plan look like? How should beginners approach building the mileage and training without risking any burnout?
So here's the way to think about here's the way to think about it. First and foremost, the distance that you're running will always be the distance. And what I mean by that is that sometimes people will say things like everyone's got to follow their own path, right? It's different for everybody else, which is true. However, if it's a half marathon, it's 13.1. If it's a marathon, it's 26.2. So the end result is always the same. So when you're looking at some sort of training plan or protocol, you are going to have to do that distance. The goal is not to find the easiest plan. Or the goal is not to find the plan that tells you that you don't have to do the work. And the reason why I say that is because I do see that, Nikita. I'm not being negative. I do see the occasional, you don't have to do you still got to do the work, but it's how that work fits for you. So first principle is I think you can overtrain, but I don't think you can be over-prepared. And what I mean by that is, like, if, for example, a typical, and that's big inverted commas, a typical training plan for a half marathon is 12 weeks, and for a full marathon, it's 16 weeks. However, if you do a 16-week plan for a half, that's okay, because you'll only overtrain if you work too hard in the plan or you don't give yourself enough time to taper at the end, okay? That's how you'll overtrain, but you can't over-prepare. So let's say you've got a September half marathon. Roughly, you would start training July, June for that.
Yeah, I started in December.
Yeah, see what I mean? Because you're building a base. So what I did, what really helped me with my marathon training cycle this time is that I did 3 to 4 weeks of base building. I said, right, I need to up my mileage because I know what's coming. Now, a good training plan should have some kind of horseshoe element to it. All right. So you build up, you hit some peak weeks, and then you drop down, right? So typically, let's go marathon first. So typically, you would have a build-up phase in your marathon. You would then have your peak weeks, but built into your peak weeks will be adaptation or deload weeks, which basically means it would be like 2 weeks of work, a lighter week, still mileage, but a lighter week, 2 more weeks of work. It's that sort of theme, yeah? So it should always look like an inverted horseshoe. So it should build up, peak, build, and then come back down so you can rest, recover, build up your glycogen stores for the day. Very similar to a half as well. Now, if we're talking beginner, because I'm very simple in what I do. When I'm coaching people, I usually deal with two types of people. People who are looking just to get round and people who are looking to get faster, right? Now, when we say get round, we have kind of normally got a time in our head. So we say get round as almost like a comfort blanket. But most people have got I'd like to get round, but I'd like to get round in 2 hours, 10 minutes. They've got this stuff. So, but I think most beginners just need to understand and appreciate the mileage on the legs. So if you get too technical and you start talking about threshold and, strides and all this business, it can get a little bit overwhelming. Whereas most people just need to get the mileage on the legs. Get faster. Well, that's where you need to have hills and intervals and thresholds and all that. So for me, it's number one principle. And I go through this on the podcast as well. So feel free to go and check that out on Spotify. My podcast quickly is short. I do 15 minutes because I like it to do it weekly, so I keep it consistent. So I do a podcast on the perfect plan, right? So your first principle is get yourself a plan, because honestly, since I've been doing this on Insta, you'd be amazed how many people don't follow a plan. Number one, just following a plan is a big win. Number two, make sure that plan is adaptable to you. So, for example, I can't do the Monday this, Tuesday that, Wednesday this, that, because of my situation here. I can't bugger off and do a big long run on a Sunday and leave my wife with 2 kids. So, I've got to mix my week up. Probably very similar to yourself. I've got the flexibility to be able to do that. Not everybody has. So you've got to be able to have that. And this is some of the coaching work I do with people. One of the biggest things I've done with a lot of the guys in there at the moment who are training for a spring marathon end of April is teach them how to make their plan flexible. So the first thing is have a plan. The second thing is understand how flexibility in that and allow for that and know it's okay for it to be flexible. And the third thing is what I call the jigsaw theory. Now, if you've got a jigsaw, you want to get as many pieces into that jigsaw so you can at least recognize what the picture is, right? So you know, for example. But if you haven't got enough pieces in there and don't know what it is, that's a problem. And I think training for a bigger distance from where there's more time involved, like a half or a full marathon, I think you've got to adopt the jigsaw theory, which is I'm not going to get all the pieces in because you're not, unless you're 21 single and you've got all the time in the world. But you get as many pieces in as possible, but don't beat yourself up if you miss a piece. Just understand on the back of that as an asterisk what are the really important elements of marathon training? And this is something that some people disagree with me on this, Nikita, but this is something I believe. You've got to look at a plan and go, I call it the minimum effective dose. I don't know whether that's the right expression. I got it from a really good book I read years ago, but I call it that. It's like, right, what are the things I have to do in that plan? So, for example, if you're in a peak week and something happened and you could only train 3 times, your most important run, I would argue, is your long run. Okay. That's my mindset. So it's putting that weight on. I know I need to do that. So at least if you do get that negative mindset of beating yourself up and going, I haven't run as much as I can, but I still did my 15 miler. For me, and that's based on experience, I think that's not a bad mindset to have, because at least then you don't focus on the runs you missed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think you are going to miss runs. Now, if you can follow a plan to the letter, knock yourself out. So that's the other principle. So firstly, follow a plan. Secondly, understand how to make it flexible. Thirdly, understand what's important in a marathon or half marathon training plan, and know that it's a complete plan. Like if it's a marathon plan, it's 16 weeks, and there's a reason why it's 16 weeks. You don't run a marathon in one run, and also you don't mess up a marathon in one run. It's the jigsaw. You've got to look at it as a jigsaw puzzle. So that's the other principle. And another principle is understand that there are other things that you potentially have to do, make it the most, what word do I want to use here? So it's doable. Yeah. So first and foremost is nutrition. So you've got to have a clue about nutrition. You don't have to be an expert. It's not complicated. You've got to have a decent clue about nutrition. First and foremost, if you are, because most people concern themselves with injuries, right? So let's look at nutrition from an injury point of view. So the reason why people get injured with running is lack of strength, overuse, and too much inflammatory food. That's my experience. So most runners license to carb, right? Or license to inflammatory food. So you've got to have...
What is inflammatory food? Some examples, if you could give us.
Sugar, classic, and basically, I like to keep things nice and simple. So anything that's processed, right? So anything pretty much... The way I look at nutrition is this. I look at it in degrees of separation. Nobody's perfect. I could sit here and wax on about eating real food and eating organic food and all this. But, Mrs. Smith with 2 kids and a busy schedule is going to go, I ain't got time. But let's look at degrees of separation. So you've got, for example, I always use cereal. So you've got porridge oats made in a factory. Yeah. Not great, but better than chocolate Cocoa Pops or, sugary honey nut loops or whatever. So you've got, well, I'm making the best choice I possibly can. Yeah. So if you make the best choice you possibly can more often than not, you're going to get best results. Yes, we could all eat organic and real food and, drink green smoothies and bark at the harvest moon, but that's not always practical from a point of view. Yeah. So what you've got to say is degrees of separation. So there's a really good book called In Defense of Food by Michael Pollan, and he says 3 things. He says, eat food, mostly plants, not too much. And I think that's quite a good way of phrasing. Eat food. And what he means by food is as close to real as possible. I'll just tangent. If you're overweight, you need to be in a calorie deficit. Don't even go there. Just get yourself in a calorie deficit. Get yourself a free food logging app. Get yourself in a deficit for a couple of weeks and check the results. Yeah, don't listen to anybody else. Get yourself in a deficit, because by proxy, if you're eating in a calorie deficit, you are normally going to be eating healthy anyway, because if you're eating food that's not nutritious, your body will crave more, because you've got overweight people who are malnourished because they're eating loads of food but eating no nutrients. So the body needs nutrients, not food, as you know. That's the first thing. So let's park that over there from a weight loss point of view. But what you want to do is make sure that most of the stuff that you eat is as close to real as possible and being in a calorie deficit. Yeah. Not perfect. I'm not perfect. I like my little treats, but it's as close to real as possible. And then have an understanding of, so number one, if you're in a weight loss place, calorie deficit.
Let's talk about running phase. So you can't be if you're getting better at running.
Well, you can't. Well, here's the thing. So you can't out-train a bad diet, right? And I've tried. I'm a marathoner and I've tried. I used to be fat. I love food. You can't. Even now, I literally, you can't do it. So what you've got to do, especially as you get older, I'm an older runner. I'm nearly 50. I'm 48 in July. I can perform at a very, very good level for my age. My fitness age on my VO2 max is 20. So I'm decent for my age, right? Considering where I came from. So you can't have the same leeway. So what you've got to do is say to yourself, right, I need to make sure that I'm eating good quality, as best quality as I can food if I'm running, because I need to make sure that I keep the inflammation down. And that's going to be things like stuff that's got like omega-3s, for example. So whether that's vegetarian or not, it's completely irrelevant. So if you're vegetarian, you could eat, walnuts, power food, chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, absolute power foods, things like that. If you do eat sort of meat or fish, you've obviously got your oily fishes, absolute power foods as well. So you've got to try, and you can Google this stuff, and then leafy greens, berries. So try and eat as many anti-inflammatory foods as you can alongside the running journey, and don't just use it as license to carb. Yes, you can eat more because especially if you train for a marathon, you are going to be. So I use a calculation to tell people that here's how you work out your calorie consumption, even if you're training for a marathon. And it does adjust, but you can't just eat garbage because that's going to then have an impact on your joints. And I think that's what causes a lot of problems, that lack of strength and overuse.
Okay. But I mean, obviously you wouldn't recommend somebody to try to, be on a calorie deficit while training for a marathon or half marathon.
No. The reason why I took that in is because I want to get the two distinctions clear, because people sometimes get confused between, I think, weight loss and exercise. I think they're different things. Because if you were obese, you could sit at home, put yourself in a massive calorie deficit and lose weight, not move. Now, the movement would obviously have all the benefits and it would help. When you're in a running place, what I'm saying is you have to be careful that you don't use that as an excuse just to eat what you want, cause additional inflammation in your body, because running, remember, is inflammatory. Now, that inflammatory response also causes an adaptation, which is a good thing. But if you're then adding on inflammatory foods, sugar, loads of white carbs, tons of flour, tons of processed foods on top of that, it's going to cause problems. Yeah. So that's why I think that's just, especially as your age, I think that's important, because that's going to give you optimum performance. And it's just about understanding if something's made in a factory, it can't be that good for you. If something's made in nature, it can't be that bad for you.
Yeah,
that's the way I look at it. And that's the way to look at nutrition for food. There are ways of managing calories. It's interesting actually, because I think people, when they've had a weight loss problem and they start running, they come to me and they say, I'm a bit worried because I used to really love food, and I'm worried that if I start running, I'll start thinking I can eat more. And I get it because I've been there. So I'd park that over there. But so anti-inflammatory. And then the other way to avoid injury, this is another principle, is some kind of strength training. And that comes down to what you can do. Because the apex, I did a podcast on this, the apex is lifting weights. Yeah. That's top of the shop, right? Now, that's not you go into the gym on a bro split 4 days a week. That's you go in. What I say to people is, if you can get in once, here's what I recommend. If you can get in twice, here's what I can recommend. Because normally people haven't got, I can only get in twice on a marathon training. Do you know what I mean? So it's about what you do. If you can't do that with weights in a gym, obviously weights at home, kettlebells, dumbbells, whatever. If you can't do that, then some kind of body weight workout, including yoga and Pilates, is still going to have a benefit. Yeah. So for me, most runners that I work with or deal with aren't doing anything at all. So getting them to do something is a benefit. Yeah. And that's kind of it. So the key, just to round that up, because I could do about 16 podcasts here on this subject. Sorry, just to I get a bit passionate. So number one, follow a plan, have a plan. Number one. Yeah. Number two, understand how to make that plan flexible if you need to. Number three, understand the jigsaw puzzle theory and have some kind of understanding about your mindset and how to get back on track, which is the jigsaw thing. And then number four, injury prevention umbrella. Underneath that, be conscious of your diet, as in inflammatory versus anti-inflammatory foods. That includes supplementation as well, which might be a thing. Like, an omega-3 supplement or a magnesium particularly is the one I always recommend. If someone puts you up against the wall with a gun to my head and says, what's the one thing everybody should take? Magnesium. Because most people are deficient in it. If you're a guy and you're over 30, zinc as well, because your testosterone drops, so I'd recommend zinc. I take it because I lift weights and I'm a guy over 30, so you need to offset your testosterone. And that's why for the men who listen to this, if there are any men who listen to this, you should be lifting weights and taking zinc. And then, so if you do want to, but I don't think that, magnesium's the only one, but over and above that, you can get most things from your diet. I think as long as you do those things, you'll be absolutely fine. And then, that's the basis. And then that's the cake. And if you wanted to stick sprinkles and cherries on the top, then get a coach, get part of a program, do all that business. But actually, for most people, if you just did those things, you'd be fine.
Nice. In terms of fueling, so obviously fuel is super important when you're in a marathon training, right? Like we need energy, we need carbs, we need the glycogen and all of that. So what is your go-to approach for pre-run, during run, and post-run? Because like for me personally, I've still now gotten to a point where I don't do any during run food because I guess, like the maximum I've been doing so far is 10K and I just don't feel like I need it. So I've not been, but I think over the next couple of weeks, my mileage is going to start going up. And, I always see these posts on Instagram where, these girls are like taking this bag for their 10K with all this. And I'm like, okay, realistically, I know I don't need it because I'm pretty full when I go on my runs and I'm fine. But there's going to be a point where I'm going to start to have to need something. So what is the best options pre-run, during run, and post-run nutrition?
Right. So I'm going to caveat this by saying that we're going to assume that everybody listening to this is a perfectly healthy human being who's got no issues at all, right? So I'm going to caveat that disclaimer. You've got me. You can't come after me. So I think that most people can run up to 10K fasted. Hydrated, important, maybe a little bit of caffeine, but I think most people could get away with just running a 10K without the need for food, right? It's not going to do any harm necessarily, but I don't think it's necessary, particularly if you run early in the morning. I can run up to 10 miles comfortably fasted, right? Not going at any great pace or whatever. And that also depends on your day before nutrition. But for my recommendation to anybody is I don't think you need anything up to an hour's of exercise. I don't think you need food unless you are racing. Yeah. Certainly not 5K. Certainly not 5K. I think most people can get away with it. As long as you're hydrated, that's important. Pre-run is key principles. Firstly, you want based on what I was just saying, you want high carb, low fiber, not junk. So it needs a bit of work. Yeah. So you need high carb, but low fiber. Now, if you've ever been caught short, anybody listening to this, you know why the fiber's a problem. You can't be eating healthily and whacking down a load of bran flakes or brown fibrous food and then going for a run because
people shit themselves.
That's exactly right. And I'm glad I'm on a podcast where someone said that because that's really, I don't know.
This in this podcast, you could swear it's all good.
Okay, good. Because people shit themselves and you don't want to be caught short. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, you need to give yourself enough time because food digestion is a very powerful process. Hence why you shouldn't eat before bed and you shouldn't eat before exercise because you want your energy you either want yourself to calm down and relax before bed so digestion's not going mad. And when you're running, you want your energy to focus on the running, not the digestion. So you want to minimize digestion, right? So you want to go at least 2 hours before a run, food, at least. Then your hydration, you're not a camel. You can't carry water with you in your hump. So you don't want to be drinking loads of water either because, again, you'll be pissing like a witch, as the expression goes. I heard once. No idea what that means, but it will help you remember. So I heard that once and I thought, yeah, let's go with that. So you don't want that either. You don't want it sloshing around. So you want my go-to is 2 hours minimum for food, 3 hours for marathon, maybe even longer if it's a bigger meal. Hydration, your last big drink should be hour and a half before. If you need to sip or maybe even angry juice, double espresso, as I call it, just before you go out, that's fine. But as minimal fluid as possible. If you get a bit of dry mouth, just a bit of sipping. And even on race day, I call it sip and spit. Trick your mouth to think it's got... Because if you're... And you shouldn't be going any more than probably 500 to 600 mil in the morning of a race or a run. Yeah. And that's an hour and a half before. You can experiment with that, but you need to give enough time as possible to let your food digest and let you go to the toilet and get it out. If you're racing, you're going to have probably 3 wheeze. Your first one in the morning, your second one, then your nervous one. And you need to account for all 3. Maybe even more. Depends on where you're at in life. But yeah, so that's normally what happens. In race fueling, don't worry about it until you get to marathon distance or over 13 miles. I don't think that unless you want to get faster, I don't think that you need in-race nutrition even for a half. In-race hydration, depending on where you're racing, you mentioned sort of Kuwait and if it's hotter and things like that, that's different. That's it. Let's put that conversation. If it's hot, you got to take care of yourself and you might need to hydrate on the run and take on as much fluid as possible because you're going to lose a lot more. I don't think people need in-race fueling unless they are running fast, even on a half marathon, as long as they're prepared well. You can do, but I don't think it's necessary.
But if you do, what do you have? Is it just a gel pack?
Quick digesting. Gels, if your stomach can cope with them. There are other things as well, blocks. There's a brand called Vroom, which I found at the running show, which are like these little chewy things, which are high caffeine, high carb, which don't touch the sides. They go straight and get digested. What you're trying to do is minimize digestion. So you want it burnt up as quick as possible and getting stored as glycogen. Does that make sense? You don't want anything that's going to go through. You want that for your healthy eating, so you don't eat more, but not for running, because it's going to take all your energy away. So, for example, if I'm having gels, I have gels. My stomach can cope with them. I go every 4 miles. That's just what I do. But one of the things, Nikita, that I get a lot, particularly on Instagram, people will ask me questions and they'll say, you give me advice on fueling. And I say, research and test. Because I can tell you what I do. But if you're doing a marathon, you want to make sure that goes back to my point about the minimum effective dose. You should be testing all of this stuff well in advance. If you are buying different gels the day before a marathon, an expo, something's gone wrong in your training plan.
Mm,
You need to have this stuff tested, yeah? So in-race fueling depends. Marathon's a different conversation. It depends on that. But I think you shouldn't need any more than, say, even if you did one gel on a half marathon, if that, unless you are really struggling. Example, I did a big long run yesterday, my last longish run of this cycle. About halfway around, I live in like quite a residential area, so there's always shops and stuff. So I got about halfway around and I was like, I'm dehydrated a little bit here. So I stopped, got myself a bit of a drink, and off I went. Now, that's a mistake that I wouldn't make on race day. And of course, there's people on the sides and stuff. But because I was in a training run, it was like, it's okay. So that's what I mean by experimenting. You've got to experiment. But the most important thing is hydration, because you've got to make sure you're hydrated, particularly to go before the run. But a lot of this stuff is research and test. And then after run, you want... I don't agree, is that the right word? I don't think anybody should be going straight from a race into the pub or into a bar. I just don't. I think you need to do, maybe later on, but I just think you need to do your recovery first. And for me,
I experienced that a long time ago. It was the worst idea of my life. I did a long bike ride, like cycling, 15 days of cycling.
Yeah.
At 1,200 kilometers. And then when we arrived at the location, I went straight to start drinking. Oh my God. No.
Did a half marathon a few years ago, and we went straight to the pub, and it was one of my fastest ones to date. It was relatively warm, it was quite humid. I had only a few beers. I've had 4 or 5 beers. I remember getting the train back with my now wife, and you know that you get that cold, you get that sweat, and you start to feel like, you know, I was like, it felt really bad. So I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying straight. You know, the best thing that I've found for a post-run recovery is chocolate milk.
Really?
Yeah, because it's got a good mix of protein and carbs. It's got a really good mixing. And you can get the good quality, like the Huel and that. That's quite a good one. 400 calories, loads of stuff in there. It's obviously ticks the vegan box if you're in that place. So something like that is a good way of just getting in the necessary macros. So you know you're getting your protein and your carbs. You're getting that replenishment. If you do a bigger run, then it's okay to have like an energy drink straight afterwards, because that's going to quickly replace that lost glycogen. You should never be, in my opinion, touching energy drinks at all, except around a big run. You don't need it. Your body stores enough. Your body's got enough fat in it to burn and use as fuel, and you can make better choices. The only time I would ever use an energy drink is around a run. So, for example, if I get back I got back from a 20-miler the other day, I was in a bit of a rush. Energy drink straight down the hatch, 30 grams of carbs straight in, replacing that glycogen. Bang, yeah. And it's just getting something back in the system. So I do use electrolytes. I got into the habit of using the effervescent ones, Science and Sports, so I use those. And that's just something I do to aid hydration. If you are racing, then I always recommend you start using electrolytes maybe a week before, just to get your salts up and get your body up. And this is all correlation, not causation, Nikita, okay? These are just things that I've tested. I'm not dogmatic. I'm like, look, the distance is still the distance, but here's some of the I've tested. So I think your pre-race, I think I've seen a lot of people mess up races because of what they've done, nutrition, the day before versus, you know, the rest of the plan. And it's just about paying attention and do your research and test it, because like I said, everybody is different. Some people have got different digestive systems. Some people can cope with things a lot better. I know what works for me, but I just think, you don't want to be, some people disagree with me on this. I don't think you should be eating anything within 2 hours of a biggish run. Some people,
makes sense.
I've seen some people, very credible people, very knowledgeable people who disagree with me on that. My experience is, 2 hours minimum. Because I just think that, anything else is going to take too long to digest. So that's me.
I mean, it makes sense. Yesterday I did a 9K run and I ate, I think, an hour before the run, and it was not an enjoyable run.
Yeah. I'm not saying this is the way, because I hate dogma, can't stand dogma. I'm not saying this is the way. What I'm saying is, then all you've got to do, I did a neurolinguistic programming qualification years ago, and there's this wonderful principle called if this, then that. Yeah. So if this, hour before, that happened. So not dogmatic, get in the parapet and preach, but there's a correlation there between this and this. Mm-hmm. So then you've got to ask yourself, should I do that again? Probably not. And this is the whole key to this. There's something called the law of requisite variety, which is the person with the most flexibility of behavior will end up controlling the system, right? You've got to be flexible. You've got to say, I've got to put away a preconceived belief here. I've been doing some research recently. I've heard some stuff that's blown my mind. I'm like, actually, I need to perhaps try that. But you don't want to be changing anything. If any of you listening to this are racing soon, don't change anything too close to race day because it will mess with your prep, either psychologically or physically. So if you're entering into a cycle, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, you've got this blank canvas to mess with it. Do you know what I mean? But mess with it from the start, not, 14 weeks. Like, it's like me now going into tapering in 2 weeks going, I'll start changing everything. It's going to knock you off course. I know what works. I know what gels work. I know what trainers work. I know what kit works. I know, what to do. Experiment. Don't be dogmatic. Be willing to let your pride go. And this is a big thing for me. Let your pride go and be willing to be not rock clay and allow yourself to be molded. Yeah. And make your own decisions. Because some people, I get quite a bit of stick, as it were. I use that expression. And people will say to me, this is the way. And I'm like, it's not. It might be for you, but it's not the way. Yeah. So like I said today, I can give you my opinions based on 14 marathons of experience over 35. Somebody else might disagree with me on that stuff. You've got to find the way that works for you. However, the distance at the end of it is always the same.
It's always the same. Yep, that's true. In terms of the run, so right now I'm running 3 times a week. I'm following a plan at the moment. And I've got, long runs, I've got strides, and I've got a progressive run. Yeah. So ideally, like you said, every program's going to be different. So ideally, like you did say that the long run is probably the most important, but what is the most ideal plan in terms of different types of runs to actually see progress in both the miles and the pace? And
I saw this the other day. Somebody posted something. It was a very, very good accomplished marathon runner. And they posted something. I thought that's quite interesting. And I kind of agreed with it, which is if you went out 3 times a week and you did a short run, a medium sort of pacey run with pace elements to it, and then a long run, that's okay. Does that make sense? So you're literally ticking 3 boxes, which is your slow run, which can either be your recovery run or whatever. You've then got your pace run, where you're challenging yourself to push yourself a little bit further. And there's varying types of that. And then you've got your long run, and the long run is contextual to where you are in the plan. So your long run in the first couple of weeks might be 7 miles. Your long run at week 7 might be 15 miles. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever. So I quite like that because it's like you're ticking 3 boxes. So if everyone did that across 16 weeks, they'd probably be ready for a marathon because the long run's obviously going to build up, isn't it? So it might start at 8 miles, but then eventually it'll be 20. So if someone did say for example, they did a 10K, a fast, an 8 mile, an 8 mile, 13K with whatever that is with speed elements in there, and then a 20-mile run, and they did that for 4 or 5 weeks in the middle of a training plan, they'd probably be okay. Do you know what I'm saying? Because they're ticking 3 of the boxes. I thought that's a nice, simple way to explain it. Because at least then that you're ticking 3 big boxes that usually form a big... Because if you look at a standard marathon or even a half plan, there's going to be 3 types of running there. There's going to be easy, there's going to be hard, which is tempo, stroke hard, and then long run. Yeah. Quickly, yeah. And then if you do a proper detailed plan, like I run, there are some weeks I've run every day, because it says on my plan, my plan is 6 days a week, but mine's a different type of plan. But even still, it's just a mix of easy runs, fast runs, and long runs. So
okay, so I'm doing good in that sense.
Well, I mean, because the thing is as well, and because this is something I've been studying recently, and it's interesting because I've had people with injuries. I've had people in my running program, they're doing the big spring marathons end of April, and I've got people with niggles. And actually, some people throw the towel in. Was actually, even if you mimicked and I heard this the other day on a podcast, if you mimicked your running plan in another cross-training discipline, so if you did if you couldn't run for a week, but you cycled and did the same plan, like you did a tempo and easy and a long on a bike, it's going to give you the same benefit because you're still working the same. Still a workout, so it's better. You understand? So if you're doing cross training as well, that's obviously helping you because it's working. It's still building your fitness level, which is what you need. Just because your feet aren't hitting the floor doesn't mean that's not still got its place. So if you're doing 3 runs a week and you're also doing cycling on top, then you're ticking a lot of boxes, and it just then comes back down. So a good coach, the first answer a good coach will always answer a question with is it depends. So when someone says is this, it depends, because then the follow up question to that is, well, what's your goal? It depends what you're looking to do, and then actually you can then tailor it to them. But it's always depends. And too often we get people, it depends. So yes, if you're doing Yeah, it sounds like it, because you're doing other things as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm feeling quite good. Like you said, the long runs, the distance is increasing week by week. The first couple of weeks, it was like 5K, then 6K. Now the long runs are going up to 10Ks. Definitely going to start increasing. Awesome. I wanted to come into injury prevention and, injury prevention a little bit. Obviously, strength training is super important, the whole part of this.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the mobility and the flexibility and things like that. Like, what are your recommendations in that? Like, obviously, it's an important part.
Well, it depends. Yeah, that depends as well. So I think that most people that I work with are recreational runners. So typically they'll be sat down all day, then they'll go and run. Yeah, they're not like athletes or anything like that. They're not in that place. So so most people are coming from a place of they either sit down all day for work, or they sit down all day, or they're sedentary for most of the time, right? So if you're a sedentary person who's looking to train for anything, then yes, mobility particularly is important, like a warm-up. Now, you don't have to get mad with warm-ups. It's just understanding that a lot of it is psychological and a lot of it is just building yourself up to run. So I think a lot of injuries are caused by overtraining and lack of strength. Unless you're going out super quick, I don't think many recreational runners get injured from not warming up. Does that make sense? If you're an athlete and you just go, like, if you just get off, if you're at your desk and then jump up and go and do 6.5-minute miles, you're probably going to get injured because you've not given yourself your body chance to adapt. The way to look at mobility is it's important, but just think about it in the sense of how am I getting myself ready for this run? Because ultimately, if you start off really slow, that's also a form of a warm-up. It's also a form of mobility because you're not going to go out too quick. So I always say to people, if you are going from a sedentary position or a sitting position or whatever, majority of the time to running, then you should perhaps do some mobility work. And that would typically just be, I like the idea of glute activation. So activating your glutes, squats, lunges, the big movements. So I'm always bang for your buck, which I mean by do big movements that get a lot of muscles worked. So literally I've got on my Instagram page, I've got my can't be bothered to warm up, which is a little bit satirical, but it's true. Like a lot of people warm. So it's literally like 10 leg swings on each leg, limited range of motion. You don't want to go too far to warm up the hamstrings and hips, and then literally 15 bodyweight squats. Now, if most recreational runners did that, they'd probably be okay, to be fair. You can go to town on that, but I don't think you need to do more. I mean, obviously, if you've had advice, obviously caveat again, physio, they'll tell you what to do. So I think a basic mobility work, particularly if sedentary, is important. And literally, if it is just that, a couple of leg swings on either direction, 10 of each on either one, and then because you do 15 bodyweight squats, it's going to raise your body temperature. It's going to work a lot of muscles. It's going to get the blood pumping, and also it's going to activate your glutes. From what I've researched and heard, that's probably one of the most important things. But a little bit of mobility work. Stretching afterwards is a tricky one.
Because, that's another thing.
Yeah, it's one of them. It's one of those where some people, it's like caffeine. Some people say it's the devil and some people say it's brilliant. It's the same with stretching. Some people say, well, you've got to do this. And other people say, well, actually, do you? I think you've got to do what works for you. And I also think that because once you get down the rabbit hole, I think you could potentially end up getting overwhelmed because people think, oh my God, I've got to do all that stretching. Most people, I think if you stretched, I'm quite a simple person. I think if you stretched your hip flexors and your hamstrings after a run, and that was all, I think that'd be enough for most people.
Yeah, that's usually what I do, and I foam roll a little bit as well.
Yeah, and then you can go to that level. But for the simple person out there, I think, who's just like, look, I think if you do your hip flexors, and again, there's a stretch on my Instagram, they can't be able to stretch. I just do a hip flexor, because I had a problem with my hip a few years ago, and then a hamstring. I think for most people that would probably be enough if they are literally just say, I'm a busy person, I sit at a desk all day, just tell me the basics so I can go. If you're a bit more advanced, foam rolling, yoga, Pilates, that sort of thing, different conversation. For most people, quick mobility, glute activation, bit of hamstring activation, bit of hip movement, bit of hip mobility, and then hip flexors, hips and hamstrings afterwards, you'll probably do okay. Most people don't. Seriously, most people, because what I've got to remember is that stretching, and this, I'll do this because this will help people if they don't know this. You'll know this. Stretching does not stop DOMS. It just doesn't, and it never has. Whereas people think, oh, if I stretch, no, muscle soreness is basically you've done some new shit. So your body's going to go, you've torn the fibers, I'm going to kick back here. That's what soreness is, right? And the more you exercise, the less sore you get. So I literally will go, like on Sunday, and I'm so grateful to be able to do this. I ran 21 miles, came straight back in the house, had a quick recovery drink, showered, took my kids to the zoo. That's what I had. You know what I mean? I'm so grateful to be able to do that. But I wasn't struggling. Obviously, I knew about it. I just run 20 miles. DOMS, stretching doesn't fix DOMS, so don't think that it does. Yeah, that's just one of those things. It's going to happen when you do new stuff. And DOMS is not the goal of any workout, by the way. It's got no correlation to the effectiveness of workout either.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've had some clients sometimes tell me, yeah, I don't know, it's been like going to the gym for 2 weeks, but I don't feel pain like I used to feel before. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing.
You can see why most normal people get put off by, when they hear stuff like that. It's just nonsense. It's not true. But
yeah,
will it help? Yes. It's the extent of which it helps, which is the conversation we need to have. But for most normal people who are recreational runners who are looking to do a first event, quick mobility, big movements, even if it's 20 bodyweight squats, that's going to be enough, I think, to get things moving. So, and if you start off slow, to be fine. And then afterwards, just a very basic hip flexor and hamstring for me is enough, really. Because I don't see, I was going to go off on a tangent. I don't see, like, for example, a classic quad stretch. Most people don't struggle to run because of problems with their quads. It's usually the back. Do you know what I mean? It's usually the back. I tore a hamstring last year, little tear, grade A, so nothing big. But I tore a tiny little tear in my hamstring going for my 10K PB. And that was because I was running too fast and I wasn't conditioned enough. And I decelerated and it popped. And but then I went to see a physio and he told me what to do and I worked around it. But literally, most problems that I've had have always been the back.
Yeah, I mean, if when I run, I always feel if I'm tight or anything, or I've had the leg day or whatever, it's always the back that I feel. It's never the front. Yeah,
and all that, and this is just for basic people. So all this, I mean, I've got a little ice pack that I use on certain things, but again, is that placebo? We don't.
Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, we don't. And this is the thing. We don't want to be too much that because you'll end up spending thousands on saunas and cold plunge and all this. And that's all great. But most people actually.
Saunas, I think, are really great, though. I feel like it does help me reduce DOMS for sure. Like, at least for me, it's helped a lot.
My thing has always been get better at running first and then look at all the bells.
Yeah, for sure. My old gym used to have a sauna. Now I don't have a sauna at this gym, so I don't use one anymore, and it's fine. But it was helpful.
It does help.
Yeah. There was two more things I wanted to actually jump into before we wrap this up. I wanted to ask what your thoughts are on getting a sole inside the shoe, because I have flat feet. A lot of people I know also do. And every time I've gone to a physio, they're always like, oh, you just get a sole put into your shoe. Do you think that actually going to help the way I run? Because I know everyone has their own way, but like for me, my one foot kind of goes out the other way. So it doesn't impact the ground the way that it should because of the flat feet. Some people have said, don't get a sole. It's a waste of money and a waste of time. Just run. Other people say, get a sole. And it's like, do you get a sole in your shoe or not?
My advice is always the same for this. Go and get your gait analysis done and speak to a physio, and that's it. Don't let anybody who is not an expert in that field tell you anything else online or offline. That includes me, because I don't know. I've got one physio who's absolutely brilliant. I always go and see him. If you're concerned about any sort of problems with your feet and the way they move, go and get your gait done, take it on the chin, pay the money, get yourself on the treadmill, get them to look at you, get them to recommend a shoe. That's it. You can't Dr. Google this stuff because, again, people get too dogmatic and they go down and you don't know who you're talking to. I see people asking, one of my biggest bugbears has always been people asking strangers in random Facebook groups for advice. They should be asking professionals.
So weird.
You don't know these. And I get it. I'm not, this is nothing what I say is personal. I get it. But you don't know these people. You don't know them. And I'm like, people ask me for basically coaching on Instagram. I'm like, I don't know you. I'm not being rude. I don't know anything about you. Whereas some people are going both feet. Get yourself this in song. No. Go and see somebody who's an expert in that field and they will tell you exactly what to do. And then if you don't like that, go and see another person who's in a similar field. But I'm not a physio, I'm not a pain expert. So I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon and go, oh, do this, do that. My advice is always the same. Do whatever you need to do to achieve your goal.
Yeah,
and if that includes putting your hand in your pocket to go and see a physio, spend the money, and a good one, like my one, will only see you once. When I tore my hamstring, you went, do this, off you go.
Yeah. So, makes sense. I mean, I run pretty much pain-free, but, if it can make it better, and because I take care of myself. But yeah, I've been advised by one physio that I should, and another physio that I don't need to. So yeah maybe I should find another physio. And the second thing,
another physio.
Yeah, maybe another physio. The second thing I wanted to ask you, all over my feed on Instagram, I keep seeing those strips for the nose.
Okay.
What, like, does that work, or is it just, do you know? Have you tried them?
Okay, so I'm not gonna go down this rabbit hole, but I'm gonna put nasal breathing in the same category as zone 2 training. I've never done any of it, and I've been fine. And I've never advised anybody to do any of it, and I've been fine. So what you've got to be able to do is, there's a brilliant question you can ask in life, let alone running, fitness, or whatever, is what for? That's the question. What for? I'm thinking about what for, and peel the onion. Why? Why am I doing that? What's the reason why? I don't do anything that I don't test, and I can see a direct correlation to improved performance. So I don't do nasal breathing. Now, at the end of the day, it's like, I've had people try and dig me out and say, well, no, I self-taught myself to a sub-3 marathon with a free training plan. I'm not saying this to impress anybody, without getting too technical. I just went on things. That's me. But a lot of it was based on testing and experimentation. So don't be dogmatic. If you think something, try it. But unless you can actually give a direct correlation to, I did this and it led to that, don't get sucked down the rabbit hole, because you'll get sold the magic beans.
Yeah, personally, I don't like buying any of these things. I feel like a lot of these things are just like, people are running now, so there's all running products. But, there's different things happening. But yesterday, I had a thought about it, because I constantly have like a leaky nose, and I started to realize, like, especially this time of the year, like in other times of the year, I can breathe. I'm very focused on my breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, or sometimes I try to just do nose breathing. But like recently, it's been impossible, and I feel like my breathing is really tiring me out. So since I've been looking at the stuff, like it's been showing up, I'm like, maybe that will help. I'm not sure, but I'm also thinking that I should just be a little bit more aware and more alert of the way I'm breathing, rather than try to find something else to help it.
Possibly, but even still, it's okay to try things. Like, again, let me link this to another question I get asked on people. Like, and I don't mean this to be rude. People say to me, any tips for a beginner? Go for a run. Full stop. That's all I say.
Go for a run.
What else is there, Nikita? What else is there? Tips for a beginner? Go for a run. I'm thinking I've got this thing with my nose, and I saw this thing. Try it. And if you can see a direct don't let anybody ever tell you if something's working, and this is really important. Well, this is the last point I'll make on that, so this is a good one to finish on. Don't let anybody ever, no matter what experience they've got, ever tell you not to do something that's working for you. Yeah. And that's really important, especially with running, especially as you go down the journey, go down the path. Don't ever let anybody tell you, based on their model of the world and their paradigm, to do something that doesn't work for you. Because if I did that, I wouldn't be where I am today. Yeah, it's all about. I've learned some stuff in the last 10 days that I'm like, I need to sharpen up here, because I didn't know that. And you've got to let your pride go, and you've got to be willing to be open and just try things, and don't just say this is the way. Like, for example, I'll get people on who'll try and discuss things with me, which I appreciate, but you can tell they've just copy and pasted something from Google. It's like, this is the best way to train, because, and you think you've got that off Wikipedia, which is fine, but you don't run a marathon or a half marathon on Wikipedia or Google or AI.
Yeah.
You do it outside. Always be willing to try stuff, guys. Always be willing to be flexible. Always willing to let your pride go and learn. And if you need help, just ask for it and try stuff and see if it works. And if it does, go with it. And if it doesn't, don't be afraid to say, do you know what? That isn't working for me. I'm going to try something new. And if you do that, that's how I went from, 250 pounds, smoking 20 cigarettes a day, drinking loads, hating myself to a sub-3 marathon at 45, self-taught, just by be willing to go, let's just try that. Well, let's try that. And then I went down some roads, didn't like it. You'll never catch me on a bike because I don't like it. I'm not saying it's not good. I just personally don't like it. So it's finding that thing that works for you, and always be willing to try something new and try things. And if it doesn't work, great. And if it does, you go with it and you back yourself. Because if you back yourself, that's all the backing you need.
Yep, that's a great thought. It kind of circles back to the beginning when you first said, like, the first thing is the feeling, right? Like, can you do it? Do you, it's all about the feeling. How do you feel doing it? And I think with running, it's super important with that. Like, there's a lot of things you can try and do and everything, but at the end of the day, when you're out there running, it's how are you feeling with what you're doing at the moment.
Let's go, this from being a Fit Pro. Let's go back to basics. Let's go back to basic Fit Pro qualification, rate of perceived exertion. RPE.
Yeah, that's it.
It works. How do you feel on a scale of 6 to 20 or 1 to 10, whatever calculation you want to use? How do you feel when you're doing it? If you feel okay, you know you. And if you feel okay, like with running, this is my thing. If I feel okay, well, let's just keep going and see how long I can keep going and feel like, and that's how you push through, because you're like, then you'll amaze yourself and go, well, I would just kept going for X amount of distance, but just remember, with all this myriad of information, all this stuff out there, learn to know yourself really well. It's the old Socrates, know thyself first before we go out to the world and before we consume. Know yourself. And that's how you go from where I started. You're very similar to yourself. Where I started to here, it started with curiosity. Just be curious. And as long as you're curious and even a bit confused, that's fine. Because if you're not confused, you're rigid and you're dogmatic and you won't be able to learn. And in the old Zen master story, your cup will already be full. You need to empty it.
That's true. That's a really good way to end it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I learned a lot today, honestly, and I'm going to be trying a few different things with my training as well. Preparing for this half marathon has been a tough journey, but I mean, I'm still very much in the beginning. I have a long way to go, but thank you so much. Honestly, got some really good tips here, and I hope whoever's listening, if you are training or thinking about doing a half marathon or a full marathon, that you found this conversation helpful. I will be putting all of John's information in the description below, so you can find his Instagram, and I also put a link to his podcast where you talk about running mostly, right? So all of that will be there. And if you're looking for a running coach, he's got his running program, so you can just check that out. And that's it for this week, guys. Thank you so much for watching or listening. If you are listening to this episode, please make sure to share it with a friend who you think will find it useful, or a friend who's training for half marathon. Same goes if you are watching on YouTube. And if you are not following or subscribed to the podcast yet, please make sure that you do. Thank you, guys. I will speak to you next week. Thanks so much, John. Take care.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.